That's always so dramatic to me whenever that happens. Um, how's it going, everyone? My name is AJ Dimmick. I am the director of esports for the University of Utah's varsity esports program. Just to start out, a little teeny bit about us. We have just started year number 7 of fielding a varsity esports program. When we did it in 2017, we were, and I've counted this several times, the 31st school in the country to self-declare that we institutionally supported varsity esports. And now there are over 600 schools in the country with some measure of varsity esports, depending on how you define the word. As for some of that means that they give students a space and shirts, to others that they're giving them full ride scholarships and have $40 million esports arenas, and the whole gambit across that entire spectrum. And we are on the lower end, but not on the lowest end of that. We scholarship 34 students in 4 games. We were 2-0 in Overwatch this last week. We are in the middle of League of Legends. We are in the middle of League of Legends tryouts to field our last varsity team for the year. We do it every year, and off we go. So today, what I wanted to talk to you guys about is just a little bit about the experiences that we've had over that 7 years of fielding practice rooms, fielding training spaces, and some of the things that I've learned. I am terrified that this information is entirely inapplicable to you. And so we will have I wouldn't mind a robust conversation as we go to stop me wherever I'm at to ask questions about things that might be helpful for you. I'm entirely here for you guys and for whatever you find would be beneficial, and would really like to be course corrected when I'm going somewhere that is not helpful to you at all. And there's just a few of you, so let's make this a conversation and go on as we see fit and do it. And I'm going to try to take over the screen now for what I'm doing here. All right, everyone see my very pretty esports logo, University of Utah, esports training and streaming. And so the first thing that I would really like to talk about when I do this, if I can change the frame. Things are not going well already. There we go. Oops. I'm at the end. I want to be at the beginning. Is from the biggest thing that I have learned and changing on my business cards and things, and I have this on every single talk I give, regardless it's at, is the proper spelling of esports. And the young people and the students stop taking me seriously the second we do this wrong. That there is no dash in the word esports, and there is no big E in sports. It is a big E if it's Utah esports or it's just esports. And this seems to be a shibboleth in the culture of as far as engaging with this. As far as people listening to what we have to say. And so share this as far and wide as we can. And this is the thing. Okay. So the first thing I want to talk about is, and if you're extremely conversant in games and esports, this is all review to you. If you're coming into this knowing nothing about the space whatsoever, this is probably helpful to you. Is that there's a distinct difference between just technically what an esports game is and what video games at large are trying to be, in that we're in the age of Unreal 5, the highest tech that you can possibly do to make games, to make ray tracing video games, real-time rendering graphics, things that are of the highest graphical form of anything you can think of, and having to own a $3,000 computer to make these work at the highest form, and all the marketing being own the latest and greatest NVIDIA graphics cards, CPUs, and things like that. And that is extremely true of games, and it is extremely less true of esports and those games. And the side quests, sidebar as I get into this, everything I talk about is going to be very PC centric. In my world, consoles are an absolute afterthought. They don't exist. And we know this. I do a platform survey every single year about what students game on. And I do this even though I already know, but I have anecdotal data now to kind of go correspond with the things I already know, that esports is a PC phenomenon. It is not an Xbox thing. It is not a PlayStation thing, unless you're in the FGC. It is not a Nintendo thing. There's a big Smash scene, which is a little bit in existence, but not really a big part of our ecosystem. And so when I talk about this, I'm really talking about a PC centric kind of environment because that is just what it is. And so this kind of thing is in a lot of the talks that I give that on the college campus, what are you most likely to play games on? 70% of them is a PC. I also ask them what's the second most likely thing, and that's when a Switch shows up big time. And so it is kind of the aspect of on a college campus, like what is a kid most likely to play off? He's going to have his computer, his laptop, and everyone. I have another graph says that 70% of them own a Switch, and it is kind of their thing. That those are the two devices that they have. And after that, Xbox and PlayStation are really lag behind and don't really have a presence. And the reason for that is in competitive esports and gaming, you are at a huge disadvantage in all of them except Rocket League if you have a controller. Controllers are a huge disadvantage. So for most esports games, a mouse and a keyboard are by far the biggest thing that you're going to play on. And so that brings it over to the PC ecosystem. We had a one controller based Overwatch player that came dangerously close to making our team. It is the only time it has ever happened. She was the best controller player I have ever seen and was really, really, really good. But it is very rare and doesn't happen too often. And so going back to this, differentiating between what those two games kind of ecosystems are of games like Starfield that came out this last week and are breaking every computer, don't run well on high-end machines versus Overwatch 2, which are two different kind of things. And this is what Overwatch 2 wants to run on. An esports game is designed to work on the lowest end kind of computer you can arrive at. And so these do not need to be $3,000 computers that you're on. That these games are meant to operate on low-end machines and are carefully calculated and tuned to be low-end gaming machines kind of things. And so all that push we have to get the latest and greatest Alienware kind of machines is always nice. Having better things is always better. But low-end machines is really all you need, which means probably what you have on at your schools a lot of times will work just fine without having to do much more. Sometimes you're buying a $200 graphics card away from it being perfectly viable from what you want to do, and you don't need to start over from square one. So to illustrate that, I found a game benchmark of Overwatch 2 with a GTX 1070. Let me translate that. I got a modern benchmark of a brand new within the last year game on an 8-year-old computer. And it's running at over 400. I don't really believe this, but in esports players, you know how games go on levels of the highest level graphics, and you can put it down to high, low, medium. An esports player, a competitive player, will by default always come into his game and turn it low, because an esports player wants the highest amount of frames, doesn't care how pretty it is. And on a competitive basis, they want the game to run as well as they can. And that's on a GTX 1070. And so that's on a graphics card, which came out in 2015. And so you just don't need the latest and the greatest to make these viable. And so at school, every computer monitor you have on campus, if it's not a gaming consideration, runs at 60 hertz or 60 frames, which is by default. Like every like computer screens, this is the creation of man, or like LCD screens does it. Esports players like it higher, so like a 12-year-old computer would push that monitor as high as it could go anyway, and you would have to buy a better monitor to do it better than that. And so it really is just esports games with low-end machines. Any questions about that so far? Cool. I got another screenshot here of Rocket League, and I know in high school, Rocket League is big in college. It is big and it's vibrant. It seems to be huge in use in high school esports, way bigger than in fact it is in college. And it is the biggest thing. My refrigerator at home would run Rocket League. And so that is kind of the tone and theme of what I want to communicate is we can all do so much in this space and for our students without spending much money at all. And so much of what we already have will do. there are lots of students that play on $400 laptops and they play Rocket League just fine. Probably not as well as they want to, not the latest and greatest and doing all the things, but it's a viable thing. And so that's part of the reason why Rocket League is such a huge and the greatest thing in the world in esports and gaming, is because it runs on literally everything. And so you don't need a gazillion-dollar computer to kind of do those things. Decided to give you guys like a rundown of just like in our training room, and these are all kind of new to us within the last year and a half. We have medium to high rigs in there because we can, but before last year I would have been running, 2 years ago would have been using a GTX 1070, so that really 5 or 6 year old kind of thing with a kind of a 5th gen i7 in there. And so this is really new to us, and this is really kind of a cultural thing because gamers like the latest and greatest, and we can. It is completely superfluous to what we want to do. We gravitate towards Corsair K70s. In other words, if I can, a full size keyboard with a 10 key on it because we're students, and they sometimes don't want to play video games. They do their homework, so they work in spreadsheets, need 10 key and things like that. But a gamer would like a 60% keyboard, so the small compressed keyboards and things like that. I'll get into this a little bit more about what peripherals we do for them, and it's not much. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a story of Utah Esports in terms of what every training room and practice room we've ever had, to explain amazingly how unglamorous it is what we've done, and it still is, but it all kind of works and it's all kind of viable. So this was the first practice room that we had with Utah Esports back in late 2016. And if any of you went to the U, this is the old student weight room in the field house at the University of Utah. Of when I was an undergraduate here back in the dark ages of time, this was the student weight room. And so all we could do is, originally there were folding tables out here, which then we graduated because we stole some desks from an empty classroom. We bought monitors that were 140 frames, so a little bit better than that 60 frames kind of thing that every school and every monitor is, and put computers directly on the surface. These are 36-inch tables with a big computer jammed onto it. And so this was a really compromised sort of thing that we were doing, and the students didn't like this in a lot of way. So a big problem with this, is this was folding tables that were very rickety. There are desks in here, and so it was kind of a problem. There were computers on the desks, and I'm a big proponent of not having computers on the desk with the play space. We had monitors with no tilts, and one of the things that you discover is with these esports players is they arrange their monitors in really strange ways that are really different from a person, right up close to their face, and tilted up as high as it can, so they're right over it with their hands around it, and arrange their desk space in really strange ways. And so these monitors that were only on a mount that didn't do any of those things was a problem. We stole chairs wherever we could find them that didn't have a high back, and they were not gaming chairs, even though I'm very much against gaming chairs. But it would have been better than what we have here. And we were in a room that was 80 degrees. And so one of the things, the reasons that is because these computers and computers that are playing games all at the same time are always at max load on the computers. It's always making the computer do as much as it can to play those games, and they make a lot of heat. And so in these rooms where you put LANs and you put students in these situations, and everyone's playing games with 15 or 20 computers in them, or in some of our cases 20, 30, 40 computers in them, there's a lot of heat being made in that room, and the computers use up a lot more power playing games than they do just doing normal mundane things than they would in a word processor or surfing the web or playing a video. And so the power constraints of knowing how many circuits you have in there is a really big concern and something that we've had to learn the hard way several times. Electrical engineers that make computer labs at the University of Utah will tell us on a normal power circuit that you can afford to put 6 computers on a circuit. And we've learned with gaming computers all playing games at the same time, or in our case, where we teach games, running a gaming engine, we know that you really can't do more than about 4 computers per circuit. And so noticing where you're setting up your space and identifying and having those circuits labeled on the plugs is really important to be able to spread them out, because it is terrible in mid-game or in a game that counts if all the computers turn off and you're having to go find a circuit breaker to turn them on. And so having those circuits labeled and trying to split computers on them so there's no more than 4 computers per circuit is kind of an important thing. This is training room number 1. It was very imperfect, and at the time we were so grateful for it we couldn't even believe it. Any questions so far? Cool. Practice room number 2. So we lost practice room number 1 because of that heat problem, and in that space. And when it was the student weight room, it was well over 80 degrees and too hot. And when in the summertime, when it got over like 87 degrees in there, but the students didn't care and they would all still go in there to play video games, I kind of kicked them all out and declared to everyone that would listen to me that the room wasn't habitable for people, and that bad things were going to happen to the computers, and worse, bad things were going to happen to the students. It wasn't a really good place to do it. And so back in our games building, and I don't know if I mentioned this, we run esports out of Utah in an academic unit. And as far as I know, the last time I was aware of such things, we were only one of 3 esports programs in the country that run it out of a not in student life, and some of the really small schools run it in athletics. We run it in an academic unit in a games program that is the pursuit of making gaming professionals, of studying game engineering and game art. So a lot of these things we already have and didn't have to get on our own. We just had to figure out a place to put it. And so the second iteration of a practice space was in our own building. If you've been in our building, this is the old law library at the University of Utah, where the games building now is what used to be the law school library. And when they made a new law school, we occupied this entire building and have done tons of stuff to remodel it ever since. And they literally left a lot of the furniture from the law library, including study carrels and study desks, which in these pictures is what you see the second iteration of a practice room that we had in this space, where our situation improved. It was no longer 80 degrees. Our practice spaces got a little bigger. This is something that I've been very, very committed to understanding, is on a professional esports basis, when people make $1 million a year playing these games, how big is their playing space? And replicating kind of that is something that I've been really interested in. And so what I've learned is they're smaller, but they're smaller and deeper than regular desk sizes of school desks or things like that. So 27 to 36 inches is what they usually use on a professional esports build. And the desks go deeper than 24 inches, which is what school desks usually run, and they go as deep as 30 or 32. And so ours got a little bigger here. And they had dividers between each computer, which for things like competitive integrity in esports games is an important thing. It was harder to see. It was harder to see screens next to you, and so on and so forth. So it was a little better. And we still had a lot of the same problems. That play space, because the computer had to share an area with it, was still very small. A big problem in this space is this space was out in the open. And so one of the biggest artifacts of playing esports in person with these teams, I'm sure you all know this, is that it is very loud. And students, when they're playing Overwatch, unless you like to hear the word monkey, 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 monkey really loud over and over and over and over and over again. And the artifacts of this thing is they communicate with each other with a sense of urgency. It is really loud. It is exactly like what it would sound like on a football field, people screaming at each other, except indoors where it is. And it is way better if there's a door between your players and anyone else that is not interested in hearing that. It's also oftentimes in our cases, the words that they use are things that we want a door between them and the outside world, and some of those things that happen. And so it is very nice. And so this was very imperfect for those issues, and having a closed-in space with a door to close would have been way better. The power issues were persistent. I can't emphasize enough that if you have a computer lab and you plan on every computer in that computer lab playing video games, it is drawing 30 to 40% more power than it is doing a regular thing like in a spreadsheet or in a word processor or other mundane things computers do. And so things that always work stop always working. And so going back to that, having 4 computers on a circuit and not much more than that. Still using chairs with whatever we could find. There were dividers, it was good. And the biggest thing is, the biggest benefit, it was no longer 80 degrees. We weren't worried about students fainting or losing people on losing computers and people because of the heat. And our current one and third one, I had trouble finding a good picture of this, and so I looked and found whatever picture that we could find in this space. So this space to me is one that we've designed and made particularly just for esports. This space doesn't serve any other function except to be a practice room for esports and gamers. And so here, 42-inch desks, as wide as we could make them, bigger than it would be in professional esports. There are students as well. The computers are not on the floor being kicked by students or being knocked over or having drinks spilled in them, which is since I don't like computers on the desks with them, usually it's either that or the floor. In this space, there was a shelf built over them, which allowed it to be, in a safe space, safe from the students doing things, and didn't have to share space with their desks. The monitors are fully articulated, move up and down, tilt, swivel, do all the things, and are available for the students to do all the weird things they do with them. Another reason that you like those computers up high, particularly if you are interested and many of you are, in getting sponsored computers and are engaging with like third parties to maybe give you a few computers for deliverables, like putting their name on the practice room or anything like that at your school, it is really good if you can take photos of those computers in a place where they are prominently visible, which is a big part of the consideration here of what we haven't done but would like to. It'd be very easy to call this the Alienware Utah training space, or the iBuyPower, or the MSI, or some other thing that we would do. And those computers being on a shelf above them is very useful. We graduated from the rolling chairs of whatever we had to gaming chairs, and sooner or later we're going to graduate back, as I'll show you. This room is still too hot, but not very much. It is a big concern that the more computers you put in a room, the more heat you generate, the more onus it is on the space to be cooled properly. This space gets a little too warm, but it's about the best circumstance that we've ever been in with those computers on high. We replaced them this last year with those computers with the specs that I gave you early, and these are nice. This is by far the best circumstance that we've been in. In our open space, in addition to that practice room has 40 computers. 36 actually, to be exact count. In our open space on our main room, we have another space where we have 46 computers set up in groups of 5 and one group of 1. In this case, I solved that problem of not having the computers on a play space a different way. And it is really bad. Like, I really don't like that, having the computer on the play space with them, because it just always makes their surface area they want to play on so constricted. And so we do this in groups of 5, where we use elongated cables of longer DisplayPort cables, longer power cables to plug them in, strangely, USB extensions and USB hubs on the surfaces, so that like the computers that are all the way down the row are still powered by these 5 computers. But this is a different way to solve that problem, having the computer on the play space and being able to provide all as much space as we can for them and as much flexibility to play the way they want to. And so this is another way to do it. I had to use 15-foot. This has circuits all the way down, assuming that the computers are at the desk. And so we just had to use really long power cords or power strips to get this done, just like this. And these are in groups of 5. And so that is not an accident. Rocket League is a 3v3 game. And so this accommodates, since it's more than 3, of putting lots of Rocket League teams in here. Most esports, Overwatch 1 was 6v6. But now virtually all esports are 5v5 games, teams of 5. And so having groupings of 5 is really good. This is a space that isn't dedicated to only gaming. This is a workspace for students as well. But there is always a LAN here on a Friday or Saturday night for students. And the groupings of 5 make this extremely convenient for how they want to arrange this and doing things. And so, and having, we're actually using those 5 computers in the desks. You see 3 computers on top and 2 below. And that's just how I chose to do it. There's a million different ways to do this. They're actually serving as a physical barrier so that that team couldn't see what was going on the team next to it. I imagine there's lots of different ways to solve this problem of the computer on the play space, but I think it's important to do it this way. And this space, this used to all have gaming chairs, and this year we replaced them all with office chairs, including in our training room. I will never buy a gaming chair for anything that we do ever again. And so, number 1, they are rickety and falling apart unless you get the really, 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 really expensive ones. And number 2, since they aren't the most sturdy things in the world, you guys, everyone knows how students are. It's really hard for them to not want to treat them in every single way in the world. And so office chairs just work better. This is kind of an artifact, not only in schools, but in professional esports everywhere. The thing of a gaming chair is its concept of its importance is a changing one. It is a cultural artifact that students really like. And so having a gaming chair to make your room look really snazzy is still something that students are really flattered by. And that might be a big enough reason to do it, is because students like it so much. But a high back gaming chair, or excuse me, office chair, or just a really good office chair is all I will ever do from here on. So that's kind of the way that we are committed to doing it now. All right, so you see, I'm going back a thing. You see all the peripherals, all the mice and keyboard on the desks here. That is because this space is set up for students to do schoolwork. And you see it here because this picture is old. I don't do it this way anymore. So if you were to come into one of our rooms now, and I think this is an important thing, this is the way you would see it when they come in. You would see a really nice monitor on the desk, and you would see a USB hub going to wherever that computer is, and that's it. Now, I'm going to keep lots of mice and keyboards around and headsets for students that need them. But the biggest thing that I was doing by having mice and keyboards already present, where esports players have their own mouse. It's like having your own baseball mitt and your own bat. They're not going to use yours. They're going to use the one that they're familiar with and the one that they play with. And even if it's a $20 keyboard they've had since they were 10 years old, they're going to play with theirs. And so this is a universal constant. This is the thing. So it is just, for cleanliness reasons, it was just way easier for any space that I have that's meant for gaming to have nothing there. And to make sure that they didn't just have to grab my keyboard and my mouse, throw it over their shoulder, and to dispose of it and get rid of it to be able to put their own. Because it is really hard to put it back together to those things if you're expecting them to be on the desk. And so I highly recommend this. Maybe the number 1 takeaway for what this space is just a USB hub and a nice monitor, whatever it is you're using. And it's important, like if you're using a low-end monitor, that 60 hertz that everybody has, make sure they're all that. If you're using a high-end monitor, like a 240 hertz monitor or a 140 hertz monitor or whatever gaming rig. Make sure they're all that. The only important thing in esports is that they're all the same, right? In our case, everyone here is going to be a 240 hertz monitor. They're all the same screen. And this is all you're going to find. A chair, a USB hub so they can plug their own things into it when they game. And what this accomplishes is I don't find my mice and keyboards that are the schools on every square inch of campus, including outside, and walking off on their own and doing those things because they're not going to use mine. They're going to use their own. Even if they're really nice, they're still going to use their own. To augment this, like I say, I have been really concerned about play spaces. Like since I've been doing this and wanted to do this right. This is LCS Arena, a professional esports arena where professional Valorant and professional League of Legends is played. And I asked them a strange question, like, can I come take pictures of your desks? And they're like, sure. I don't know why that you're excited about the desk, but here they are. That is the exact same monitor I have. It is branded differently, but it is an Alienware one. Mine's a Dell, but it's the Dell and Alienware are the same thing. It is the same spec thing that I have on there. They have different headphones because on their space, they are in an arena and competitive integrity requires them to use soundproofing headphones so that you can't hear the crowd yelling at you or giving away things that are in game because the crowd can see the whole play field and you are required to use their soundproofing headphones. But just like mine in this professional space, all they have is a USB hub, a little $10 USB hub on the playing surface, which every player who was competing that day would come in and plug into and kind of doing their own thing. In addition to that, you see a nice camera off to the side because they're streaming these events, and the NALCS had 50,000 viewers, I think, this last time, and so there's a big camera in every player's face going down so that they can get those reaction shots from them. But you'll notice about this playing space, this was a 36-inch wide space, and it is almost as deep. So it's a deeper kind of desk than what they do. If you want to tell students that you know about how deep an esports space is now at the highest levels, I think this is really cool. And so just like that, no peripherals on the desk. On this case, they have headphones they're required to use. And other than that, they just bring their own stuff and they're plugged into. In my case, I would always like some students don't have the means and are not going to show up with a keyboard and mouse of their own. And of course, in those instances, I'm going to have what would have been on that computer and I will give them to them. And they're okay to do this. But for most of them that take this extremely seriously, they're going to only be comfortable playing with their own things. Little shot of the playing space of us at the ESPN Esports Collegiate Championship in Houston, Texas. This space was much smaller. It was only 29 inches. It's very deep, and the same thing. In this case, you can see on the desk to the left, they did provide an esports or a keyboard and a mouse that was defaulted by the event. And of course, my guys don't want that. They bring their own mat. They brought their own keyboard. They brought their own mouse. In this case, those things got shoved off to the corner, which is exactly what happens in my esports room that I do not like. So I just bring them with nothing, and off they go, doing their things. You can see the divider there. This is an artifact that is more common than not in professional esports spaces, of having a little bit of differentiation and a little divider on the spaces. I watched them build this studio, and the guy that was doing it articulated to me that they just build the desk wherever they go because it's easier for them just to build them on site than it is ever to carry them around the country assembled. And that's what they played on. We were the runner-up. We lost to Harrisburg in the finale, and that was really close call. Anyway, okay. I want to talk about streaming for a second here and what they were doing that. Anyone have any questions about the playing space or practice spaces or training spaces or what students compete in before we go to streaming? I'm going at 1,000,000 miles an hour. I'm sorry. This is the thing. Okay. So one of the things that we have done is we have a varsity production team. And so we actually scholarship 5 students participate on this. And in 6 years, we have generated over 3,000 hours of streamed content for what we have done, and well over 1,000 matches. And so this is a big part of what we do. And wherever there is interest in esports, this is one of the corresponding facets to it that is universal. That you will have students that aren't necessarily the highest competitive players in the world, but are going to be extremely interested in participating in this way and participating with students to help stream content. And this was not something I had considered when we started here. I didn't really consider that it was that we were going to have students jump out of the way, and we did, and they were there, and we had to make places for them to do this right away. And so we now have a control room, which we do to generate all of our content, and we have a streaming a place for the on-air talent on the other side. And so where there's cameras up, and I love this picture that said, "Hi, we can talk here," because we naturally are talking in their ear, but we're telling them all sorts of things when we don't want to interrupt what they're saying, like "Go to break, go to break, go to break, go to break," and things of that nature. And so this is something that I think wherever you have varsity teams or competitive places, you should also invest a little bit on this side of it, and making sure that the students that are interested in casting or content creation or doing things also have something to do, because it's natural that they have things to do for this. And so minimal viability of what this can be done with. This does not need much. And it's sort of the theme of what I'm trying to tell you is all these things can be done with very little. And so a streaming team can be as little as a person on a laptop with a headset. And so this doesn't take a whole lot to do it. With OBS getting into their game lobby so that they can take all the player shots. They can't generate shots of their own. They can take all the player cams, and with a headset on, you can stream the game on OBS and cast it and talk about it. And this can be done really well. And so there's no reason that anytime you guys compete in a game, not just with any extra computer, laptop, anything lying around, to put OBS on and get these guys doing this and make it look as really good as you can, because even talking about it, and it is such a big deal to players that they stream their games. We used to stream until this year exclusively on Twitch. Now we stream to YouTube. We are partnered on Twitch, and so that is where we have done everything to date. I don't think it's a really good place for school esports, because it's 4th tier, 5th tier, 6th tier esports. The idea is that gamers are going to be interested because it's games, and there's always better games than you. And so I'm operating on YouTube now to stream this stuff, because we think that the branding of our school, that the University of Utah, is going to be a bigger deal to people on YouTube than being League of Legends or Overwatch or Rocket League is going to be on Twitch. 2 weeks into it, that truth is bearing fruit, and there's more engagement from different places than there otherwise would have been. So I don't think we're going to go back to Twitch anytime soon. In our current situation, we don't do the one laptop and a headset solution. In our control room, there are 7 roles that we do. And all of this is done barely on computers, exactly like any computer you would find, with nothing added to them. Some TVs we put on the wall, just going in with an HDMI computer. Those front 3 rows are observer computers. So what that means is they are in-game cameras. With the one computer setup, you can just take the same screens that the players can see, and in the lobby of every game, you can stream and just switch what players are seeing. And you can do a really good stream that way, of switching it between all your players and all their players, and just seeing what players can see without having anything else, just by pushing different in the observer tools that are usually present in most games. So just taking those shots of what all the players are doing and with the screens that they see, and you can do a cool stream that way. With what we do, we can do all those things too, and just take the player screens and show them on stream. But we can also set up in-game cameras, like somebody that is taking a shot above or to the side or wherever. And those are called observers. And they're just what they are is in-game cameramen. And all that's necessary to do that is 3 computers with the game installed on them. And then the output of those computers goes into the director computer, which is on the second row. So that second row is the person running the whole show. So we're deciding like which of those cameramen is on screen. On the TV, you see on the walls there is a preview screen of what the next shot is and what's currently on stream. And on the right is a replay machine, which is just another computer, just like the director's computer, with the same software. We call it vMix. And vMix is one step up from OBS. OBS is a free tool that everyone can have. It can do all of these things in at least a rudimentary way. And so if it's the only tool available to you, and it is the most common tool, so it's really good if students get really acquainted with it and are really good with using it. vMix is a step up and does a lot of the things that are a little easier and a little better. It is not a free tool, it's a licensed tool, and so but it's a $500 license and you can use it forever. And then you can do what is professional grade of what for that $500 license, you can do what every stream would be using. It's a very ubiquitous tool at the highest levels of streaming and esports. And so those front 3 computers are the observer computers. Those second 2 computers, the one on the right is the director computer where all the inputs from everywhere are going into his. And to his left is another computer using the exact same tool where he can set up 10-second replays. Like, let's go back to that, Marv, and see the team fight there and that kind of thing. And so all of this is available without purchasing any extra things. It's just 5 computers in the front with what you see here with a capture card. So this is a card that you can put into a computer which has 4 lines running into it. So you can do 2 cameras and 2 observer computers, or 1 camera and 3 observer computers. And this is a $700 thing. And you don't have to have this. Like, you can do really cool things without it. But just with this, so you're now, if you bought vMix and this, you're $1,100 in, and you can do so much. You can have in an adjacent room 2 casters with a camera on them of any kind. That camera goes into this capture card with 3 observer computers or whatever you want to do. And so that is from the minimum viability of spending nothing to you can spend $1,000 or $1,500 and I mean be 80% of the way to doing whatever anyone does. I always bring up the magic of the backdrop because we have one backdrop for the whole thing, and it is on everything we've ever had for 7 years, including this last weekend's stream. And it occurred to me that we are no longer EAE anymore. It never occurred to me. We were on stream the other day that we were the Entertainment Arts Engineering program, and now we're the Division of Games. We were on stream, and it still hadn't occurred to me that was the problem. But having a backdrop of having a light, a backdrop, cameras, off you go, and a capture card and vMix, and cool. And so just recapping what I've said here of simplest setup, 1 person, 1 computer, using OBS, using all those player shots. You don't need anything else. And that same person that's on the computer casting a match can do a lot of really cool things and make it really, really good. Just putting your school logo on that and the players being streamed and having everyone be able to see them, including their schoolmates and their parents, is a big deal. And just a little bit more of if you can get 7 computers without any extra bells and whistles, just computers. Get vMix, which is a $500 tool, Photoshop to make graphics and logos. With those 3 computers in the front, with the game installed, that's all it is the game installed. Now you can have observer computers with the tools, and you can do really cool things. And now you're using 5 or 6 students. That are the 2 casters or announcers, a director, which everything runs into, observers in the front row, which are setting up the digital screenshots, and somebody making graphics off the side. For instance, in League of Legends, when somebody wins a game and it's 1-0 going on to the best of 3, having somebody that sets up the graphics and the overlay to say 1-0, and a graphics computer is really simple. And so these are all things that you can do with so little, with minimal, spending nothing versus spending a little to do it. And so that's all I got in a 50-minute crash course of talking about how we like to set up very simple training spaces, which we have strong opinions on, but are simple, and being able to set up little streaming and casting spaces on that. And so anyone have any questions on that or anything to say? I'm going to not talk now. Go ahead, Tom.
I guess I do have a question. I don't know. It doesn't really pertain to what you were just talking about. Sorry. So I run a middle school program, and so much of this doesn't apply to them, but this is actually really helpful and useful for stuff to work towards. Obviously, we're not going to be streaming perhaps with 7 computers in middle school. But for Rocket League competitively, I don't have a ton of computers in my room. Is it you can have multiple controllers on one computer, right? Like you can work it like that. Would that be feasible?
Of course. Yes, you can. You can have multiple controllers on a single Rocket League game. It will split the screen if you do it, and that is most people
competitively viable then, but it could work.
It could work, yeah. It is not ideal. Rocket League is one of those games where it's the same game it's the outlier of everything I just said. It's the same game on a console as it is on a computer. There is no mechanical difference. It's the same game on a Switch as it is on a $5,000 PC. And the controls, and that is the one game where a control is preferable to a keyboard. But no, the only cost of what you're saying is it would be split screen to show every player's perspective on it, and so that would be the disadvantage. But of course, it's perfectly doable.
Okay, and then what? Speaking of equipment, what controllers would you recommend? Like, what do people like to use for that? Because I can supply.
This is a personal preference. Most Rocket League players are PlayStation controller guys. I don't know why, at all, but just by happenstance, on our team last year, we would have scholarship 6. We would have counted 9 on the team. 7 of them would have been PlayStation controller guys. Their community was really slow to advance from a PS4 controller to a PS5 controller. They hated the PS5 controller first, so they all stuck to PS4 controllers, and 2 of them were Xbox controllers. But it is just a personal preference thing. Obviously, if you're on a console, then if you're on an Xbox, then you're using Xbox controllers. If you're on a PlayStation, you're using PlayStation controllers. If you're on a computer, then all of those controllers are viable and can be used with it as you see fit.
All right, interesting. Thank you. But I would think it would be fun to see if any kids are interested in trying to stream our little matches. We'll see.
If we can help with that, like open call to everyone. Like, there's nothing that we're doing as magic, and there's nothing that we're doing that is like a super ton of expertise. But we've done 3,000 hours of it. And so we've learned a lot. And we've done cool things. Like the cool thing about the casting thing and the streaming thing is there's all sorts of things at your school, apart from esports, this is applicable to. If you have vMix and a few computers and a camera, it's just as good for the student newscast or student movies or all those other things. It's just content creation. And it's applicable to way more than esports. Here, we've done the Kyle Whittingham Coaches Show with the esports production team. We did the basketball coaches show. We did the in-house vice presidential debate party with the esports production team. So those skill sets that investing in that part of it are really valuable, not just esports. And making graphics and turning on a camera, making content, you can imagine, isn't just a thing with broadcasting games. It's what the kids are interested in, but it's applicable to a lot of different things that they could do.
Interesting. And then one other, I know this is not what this meeting is about, but how do you do tryouts for something like Rocket League?
I mean, we're in second round of tryouts that are going to happen this Wednesday. In our case, our coach likes to do them all online. And so just getting in a Discord where he can stream every game. And so it's exactly the same way if you step back far enough that you would do a tryout for a football team or a basketball team. It is all prognostication. It is all making sure that the participant is going to be a cool person that his teammates are going to like to be around and be a good student. And then after those boxes are checked firmly, the Carmelo Anthony effect is the same in esports as it is in basketball. The guy that is technically the best player, but his team seems to lose too much than it should. And so it's just guessing about which player is the best. Having a coach which understands the game and understands team play and how rotations work and all those inside Rocket League kind of things is really important. And it's exactly the same thing as holding a tryout for a football team, basketball team, or a baseball team, and guessing which ones are your best guys and going on.
Awesome. Looks like there's a question from somebody also that I will now mute, but thank you for your help.
Yeah.
Yeah, Stephen had a good question. I don't know if you have advice on it, AJ. How active is your coach during the matches?
Most competitive integrity rules dictate that coaches cannot have any sort of communication with their players during a match. So middle of the match, they can't yell at them, they can't talk to them. In some tournaments, they can't even be in the same room as them. And so all of that communication has to be between matches. And so in a Rocket League event, a coach has to be hanging out somewhere else where he can't be heard or even seen. And then in between talk to them. And during the match, they are entirely on their own. So in between matches, it's kind of a huddle up situation. Let's talk about this. Well, what went right, wrong. Everybody calm down. This is what we're going to do. And those things. And then they go back to their stations. And so that's kind of how that works.
Yeah, to kind of answer your second question there, Stephen, it is kind of weird, like very different than sports. I'm gonna look through our rule set just to make sure I'm not gonna lie to you on exactly how we do it in our league, but we have, this is something that has been discussed, and that you know, especially in high school is kind of hard because the kids are kids.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and with youth esports and things like that, like making sure that everybody's well behaved. In lots of things, apart from lots of tournaments, apart from the coach, there is a referee or a moderator that is there to make sure everything is going the way it's supposed to. But it's just there to make sure that they're there to make sure that the competitive integrity of the event is covered, but also make sure that everyone is okay. And so, and that is a different role than the coach. When the coach just talks about the game in between games.
Yeah, that is pretty much our ruling on it. I'm looking at our coaching section of our rule set now, which is starts on page 7 in case you're interested. And it is actually a different kind of ruling per game on how we coach in this league. But for pretty much all of them, mid-match is not allowed.
Any other questions? All right. Well, if you think of any later, Maddie knows where to get me. If you need any help with casting or need any help setting up a practice room, not that we know everything in the world about it, but we know a lot. Or if there's anything we can do to help you guys, we are always available and at your disposal. And so definitely want to reach out to help as much as we can. If you have more questions about directly competitive things, I think we're going to do some other talks that deal directly with games as the months go by. And so I'll be happy to take guidance from you guys about what it is you're interested in hearing about and learn. If patterns form, then we'll course correct and make presentations which help you any way that you need to be helped. But I really like this one. I think setting up a practice space or a training space is the biggest thing that I've learned about and streaming spaces as we've gotten into this, nerding out about naturally.
Perfect. Well, thank you for this week, AJ. I'm sure we will hear from you many more times in the future as we go through these months. Just in case you all didn't kind of recognize this, AJ works for the Division of Games, which is where the scholarship that we sent you flyers for also goes to. So if you have students who are interested in going to the University of Utah and studying game making in any sort of way, this is where they will go to. AJ is over esports, but the division.
I'm a graduate of the games program back in the dark ages of time, many gray hairs ago. Yeah, and so if your students are interested in the engineering of games or art, technical art or production otherwise of games, then we can help you out there too.
Exactly. And when we sent out those flyers this year to hopefully be able to get your students interested early, because it is kind of a niche thing that they can get a scholarship for if they are both a Garff Esports Club student and interested in joining up at the U. So thank you very much, AJ. I'm going to stop recording here soon, but we will see you all in the upcoming months at these workshops. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone.